Oh boy, Donkey Kong Bonanza keeps getting more interesting, and the game already looks phenomenal. Everybody knows that. I could make a video gushing about the gameplay and every single thing I think is going to happen with this game, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to save that for when the game actually comes out in a week from now. A week, less than a week at this point, we're going to be playing Donkey Kong Bonanza, but the pieces keep falling into place. We have a brand new interview here from IGN with the developers of Donkey Kong Bonanza, and we are starting to get a much better picture as to how this game came to be, what they are developing this game in mind with, and what is happening with 3D Mario behind the scenes. Now, I just did a video talking about how Donkey Kong Bonanza does not mean that Mario is far off, especially considering that we know for a fact now this game was developed by members of the Odyssey team. But what we did not know was which members of the Odyssey team is working on which game, because obviously 3D Mario has to be in development at all times. We knew that. That is easy to ascertain, but after it has been almost 8 years since Odyssey, and I know some people in my last video were saying that Bowser's Fury technically does count as that new 3D Mario game, but if it doesn't even have its own standalone release, I am not at all going to count it. So Odyssey will be the longest stretch between 3D Mario games we have ever had, and I was kind of concerned myself, and I know a lot of other people were wondering, where is 3D Mario? Are we getting a new 3D Mario game? Especially when the rumors about the Odyssey team being behind this game came out, people were wondering, what is going on with Mario? And I am fascinated by this topic because it is so interesting how Nintendo has expanded, how they are expanding and letting their developers do a little bit more about what they want to do, and also approaching them with unique ideas such as this game. It starts off with this very first question here, in which IGN asks, can you both tell me about the conception of Donkey Kong Bonanza? What idea or mechanic or theme was at the core of this game's development when it first started? Now, the people he are addressing here are very high-profile individuals. Kenta Motokura and Kazuya Takahashi both worked on Odyssey, and both have been very big prominent figures in Nintendo within the past Switch generation, and even up into the Wii U generation. They were really getting bigger roles, and now we see they are really taking a new experience with Donkey Kong Bonanza. So Motokura answers, and he says, well, I would say the very original impetus for the development of Donkey Kong Bonanza was when my boss, Mr. Koizumi the man himself, when he approached our team and asked us to consider working on a 3D Donkey Kong game. That's when we realized we really needed to know more about Donkey Kong. So we went and spoke to Mr. Miyamoto, the original creator of the character. So they talked with Miyamoto for a bit, and he helped them because he worked on the Rare games with Donkey Kong way back in the day, and they were able to get a bunch of different keynotes from him. And Koizumi, interestingly enough, had served as the director on Donkey Kong Jungle Beat back on the GameCube, where you could actually use bongo drums as the controllers for that game, and he says, and for him, one thing that was really important, distinguishing characteristic from a character like, say, Mario, is that Donkey Kong has these longer, stronger arms. So we took all these distinctive features of Donkey Kong as a character and tried to think about how we could bring them to play in a new game. And the rest is history. You can pretty much tell what he's trying to say there. They realized from the get-go, if they were going to make a 3D Donkey Kong game, they were going to have to do it the right way. And Mario is so different than Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong, in turn, is very different from Mario. For this to be a 3D platforming game by this specific team, by these developers that made Odyssey and know the platforming geniuses themselves, this had to be a different type of experience, and you can see that they built it from the ground up. And of course, it was actually meant to be on the Nintendo Switch. Just like Mario Kart World was, Donkey Kong Bonanza initially was supposed to be a Switch game. So also what that tells me is that we have yet to see a game in which this console was actually built from the ground up for. We have yet to see a game in which it was meant for the Switch 2 from day one, and that is so exciting to me because it means there's only going to be room for improvement, only room for growth. But back to Donkey Kong and his character design and how they were going around asking people, trying to stay faithful to this character, it makes so much sense now as to why this game's main gimmick is that he destroys things. Donkey Kong can destroy the entire environment you interact with. Every single thing you see is destructible, and you can also build it back up in a way, as we have seen with the Donkey Kong Direct. There is so much nuance to this game, and Donkey Kong's strength, his long arms, the way he is just an ape and Mario is a human. That difference is going to be very key in how this game is designed. He goes on to talk about voxel technology, which is a new type of technology that they use within Mario Odyssey, and they were able to use the cheese in Luncheon Kingdom to help destroy that stuff with the Hammer Bro frying pans, and that was an inspiration for how they were going to use the entire environment around Donkey Kong and how you were going to be able to destroy that. And so they really ended up using that technology a lot, and this developer was extremely helpful and valuable in getting that done. Another very interesting insight here that Motokura really kind of pushes off here is IGN says, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first time a Donkey Kong game has been made in-house at Nintendo in I think 20 years. I was wondering if you knew why the decision was to develop a new Donkey Kong game internally instead of having someone like Retro Studios make it. A very good question, by the way. Motokura answers saying, so because Nintendo does have a lot of characters to choose from, we're always considering what would be good timing to create a new game with a certain character to most please customers. But of course, that's just my best guess. You'd really have to ask Mr. Koizumi for the real answer. Because, like I said earlier, Koizumi approached this team and said, hey, why don't you make a 3D Donkey Kong game? He was the one who wanted to push this IP forward. He was the one who wanted to bring Donkey Kong back. Mr. Koizumi is incredible. If you don't know his background, he has been at Nintendo for a very, very long time. He is a very big fan of story. He is a big fan of gameplay, and he loves adding those two together. Now, something that he really butted heads with Miyamoto in the past was making sure that gameplay and that story leveled together. Because with Miyamoto, he's all about gameplay first. Miyamoto is responsible for things like Paper Mario Sticker Star, for stuff like 3D World and 3D Land, for all of the new Soup series. Like every single game that you can think of that is pretty much just gameplay first, zero story, very bland and generic, that is Miyamoto's thing, because he thinks if a game feels good and if it's fun, why would anything else matter? And I think that is a very dogmatic approach that Koizumi has been able to battle in his mind and really help be that contrast that Nintendo needed to be special. The biggest case of this butting of heads coming to a head was in Super Mario Galaxy. Miyamoto did not approve of Rosalina having a backstory. Miyamoto didn't want any story whatsoever with her at all. He just wanted her to be there, and that was it. Koizumi went behind Miyamoto's back and included the storybook feature to where you could listen and be with the Lumas and listen to her tragic backstory. He developed that and included that all by himself right behind Miyamoto's back, and until it was just too late. Miyamoto never knew until it hit store shelves, and that is incredible. We love Koizumi, and to see him continue to just push this narrative and make better games and really continue to go outside the boundaries of what Nintendo thinks they should be. I love it. I love to see it. And another very interesting tidbit from this here is that Koizumi doesn't seem to be working on this game, which tells me he is working on the next 3D Mario game. And Miyamoto has now taken a complete and total back seat to development processing because he's working on movies, he's working on theme parks, he's working on expanding other things outside of gaming. Miyamoto is incredible. Okay, he developed Donkey Kong, he developed Mario, he is the reason any of this is even a thing. And I love the guy. But to see Koizumi be able to be in full control now is incredible. And I just know the next 3D Mario game is going to be even better than Odyssey was, even more ambitious than we could ever hope for, and it was probably built ground up for the Switch 2, because I doubt they really had intentions of making a second Mario game for the Switch 1, unless it was a sequel to Odyssey, in which we know now that is not the case. This game, Donkey Kong Bonanza, is essentially the Odyssey sequel. They were working this whole time on Bowser's Fury and the next 3D Mario game, and Koizumi has full control now, and he is not only in full control, but he is a big leader, and he tells people what to do. This interview tells me that Koizumi has risen the ranks, and I love it. Keep it going, man. Keep hiring people who think like you. Keep telling people what to do, because you are awesome. IGN then goes on to ask why Pauline. Are there any reasons as to why Pauline was included? What was the thought process behind that? What was going on there? And again, this is Nintendo just being Nintendo here. They were thinking gameplay first, what would be most fun, what would be a cool idea, and then the story aspect of it all falls into place a little bit later. But this is a very, very cool origin story as to why all of this crap came to place. And so what they essentially said here was that someone had suggested Pauline would be a good choice, but Pauline was not implemented directly into the game at that time. He says, I think the moment we realized that it would actually go in that direction came about as a result of an artist who created some concept art of the zebra transformation. We saw that image, thought it was really fun, so we immediately prototyped it to try out in the game, and when our composer saw that, they decided to create specific music for that transformation. And the music for it was so good, we thought we could expand on this, turn it into a song, and maybe Pauline would be a good choice to sing that song. So then we asked the composer to create songs for each of the transformations, and I think that's really what cemented Pauline's place. I think a lot of ideas really fell into place after we had decided on Pauline as the accompanying character, and I'll let Takahashi describe those. Then Takahashi goes on, he says, I think one of the things that really works well for us in choosing Pauline is that she's human. So she speaks in a language that the player will understand. And our setting is a strange underground world where you're interacting with animals and even rocks that speak in some cases, so it's a lot to take in. And I think it's really good for the player to have another human that they can see on screen who is reacting to these strange things, noticing stuff, pointing them out, giving hints. And in a game where you take destruction as its core gameplay, there's a lot of objectives that are hidden, waiting to be discovered. So it's really helpful to have information coming to the player as audio cues, so it's not getting in the way of visual information on the screen. This is fascinating here, and I have a bunch of points to take away from it. One, like I said, they focus on gameplay first, and then the story stuff fell into place later. Pauline made sense because they wanted to implement certain types of songs, so they really honed in on that. They were like, you know what? Music is cool. This is going to be a musical transformation. You guys are the reason now that we have Pauline here, because if there's going to be a big focus on music in this game, we need someone who's going to sing. Of course, Pauline fit that bill perfectly, and then Takahashi goes on to talk about Pauline being that human, that grounding character in which she speaks, right? And that is another thing about the voice acting, because oh my goodness, this game has similar cutscenes to Odyssey, but this time Pauline speaks. She actually has a voice, and that is so freaking cool because it is the first, outside of maybe the original Donkey Kong, I can't remember, but it is the first 3D platforming Nintendo game, I believe, in which we have actual voice acting, not just like random words, not random lines, but voice acting within these cutscenes. And that, wow, that's special. I love that. Then they go on to ask, why is Pauline 13 years old? Because they specified she is 13. Why is she so young? It doesn't make a lot of sense, especially considering the last time we have seen Pauline in an official mainline Nintendo game, she was in Mario Odyssey, and she was the mayor and was very much grown up. And so they say, now as to why 13-year-old in particular was the choice, I think that's something that we want players to, in the course of enjoying the game, start to puzzle out and think for themselves. He then asks, can we confirm Donkey Kong's age? Then they say, I think that's another one that is good fodder for player theories. IGN does a great job of pushing this topic, continuing on, even though they seem to be just trying to say, quit asking, man, they'll figure it out, let the players figure it out. They continue, they say, seeing a young Pauline, and knowing that most of you worked on Super Mario Odyssey, I start to think story-wise, this is maybe a Super Mario Odyssey prequel. Is there an official Donkey Kong timeline? Is there a canon timeline that explains where all the Donkey Kong games go? Takahashi says, certainly, because a lot of team members also worked on Super Mario Odyssey, there are some similarities in terms of how they think about the setting of the characters for both games. But it's something we really can't explain all for now because we need to leave something for people to consider as they're playing the game. So what this tells me is that either one, they don't have an answer, they just thought it would be cool because the gameplay was there and they wanted to make sure that the gameplay was first, and then option number two, maybe the game does explain a little bit more why this is the case, gives us a little bit more background, and he says there are similarities, and we know for a fact that New Donk City already exists in this game. We can see on the backs of crates the NDC that has to stand for New Donk City, so the city already exists. So why is Pauline so young? I think that will definitely be explained, but as to where this fits in the timeline, is there a timeline? I kind of seriously doubt they will actually head-on address this. This will be something that the community will have to figure out and theorize about for years to come, and I am excited to do that with you all. Another very interesting question here is, he asks, okay, so this was essentially made by the Odyssey team. We could all tell right away because of the similarities to Odyssey. This was very much rooted in Mario Odyssey's style. What is the biggest difference between Odyssey and Donkey Kong Bonanza? Then he goes on to say, of course, the voxel system that we talked about earlier. It's a very big focus, being able to destroy everything in the world. He says that's the biggest difference. Then Takahashi leaps off of that and says, continuity of destruction. That's the phrase that he uses. He wants everyone to feel continuity of destruction. Now, what does that mean? Well, he means this entire world is destroyable now with this voxel technology. And so you're able to burst through these walls, go down and dig down everywhere. And so what they want you to do is that no matter where you go, where you're digging, whatever's happening, you are able to find something. That is the continuity of destruction. You are able to destroy things with a purpose, knowing things will be down there and finding things. It's not just destroying for the sake of destroying. You are actually feeling like there is a purpose behind it. He contrasts that with Mario Odyssey, in which you're not really destroying a lot, and if you are, there isn't an entire purpose to it. It's just for the fun of the player, whereas in Odyssey, it's much more tightly designed to where you're going through levels the way they designed you to do so, with obviously your own player freedom, but Donkey Kong Bonanza has a much more larger emphasis on destroying things, and that is how you complete levels. That is how you complete different facets of this game, rather than just going towards the end goal or getting a power moon. You're just destroying stuff, really. Here's another fascinating question. Hats off to IGN. He goes, why was this game best suited to release on Nintendo Switch 2 as opposed to the Nintendo Switch, or for both? Motokura goes, this game originally began its development cycle on Nintendo Switch 1, and at the time, we were still using voxel technology and thinking of lots of different ideas for applications. But when we learned about the Switch 2 development, we realized that the best implementation of these ideas and technology would be on Nintendo Switch 2. Takahashi says, and when I was previously talking about the importance of the continuity of destruction, there was something that we could expand on and have a longer continuous play experience with that kind of concept on Nintendo Switch 2. So they essentially go on to say the Switch 2 is more powerful. That's why they needed to do it, because their goal with this game could not have been fully accomplished on the Nintendo Switch, which makes it so interesting for me to see now you're able to game share Donkey Kong Bonanza on Nintendo Switches. I don't know how that's going to work at all. Now here is the perfect final question for any good journalist. Take notes, buds. If y'all want to be journalists, this is the one to ask at the end of any and every interview. Is there anything I am not asking you about that you're really excited to talk about? That's the question right there, because you want to give people an option. You want to be able to let people say something, because if you didn't ask them something that they were really dying to talk about, or that they know you should know, that's a good way to end the question. So he asked that. Motokura says, one thing I want to mention is that when we first considered making a new Donkey Kong game, we really wanted to think about how we would pull in lots of new players. We have interesting new gameplay elements, but we also wanted to give people some flexibility in terms of choosing a difficulty level they feel comfortable with. So they essentially go on to talk about the skill levels and whether or not you're going to be able to do that. That was a big design choice in Donkey Kong Bonanza to make it to where anyone and everyone could come to this game and find it accessible. Takahashi then goes on to say, and for those who have found Donkey Kong games in the past to be really difficult, we also want to mention assist mode. Of course, that continues to be another accessible thing that Nintendo is very big on, just letting people be able to enjoy their games at this level. And of course, they mention co-op play because they want to make sure that you know every single detail about this game, and co-op is a big thing. You can play as Pauline, you can do whatever you want on the screen now. You can see she's screaming, yeah, aha, all these different things. You can change the material. There is something for everyone here. You can have a brother or a sister that plays with you and be able to enjoy the experience. So yeah, that was the interview. That is everything that they covered about Donkey Kong Bonanza, and it only makes me even more excited to see, because what they focus on tells me a lot about what we should be focusing on and what they designed this game with. That is going to be so important for me in my review, and for most people knowing what this game is supposed to be about, because if I go into it thinking it's supposed to be an Odyssey sequel and it's very different than that, then obviously I'm going to be a little bit confused, but my expectations have now been set in a much better way. I cannot wait to get my hands on this game. Donkey Kong Bonanza is amazing. We now know that there is going to be a lot more story beats. We know that Koizumi is not working on this game, because he definitely would have been in this interview, and he approached them to make it. That doesn't sound like someone who wants to make it with you. That sounds like someone saying, hey, we need to do this, y'all do it. And that sounds awesome. Koizumi is working on a 3D Mario game, and he took all the best members of that team and is probably also developing that. So yeah, I am pretty excited for Donkey Kong Bonanza. It tells us a lot about what they're thinking, how they're going to develop this game, how they might develop future games, and of course, it tells us even more about 3D Mario and what is Koizumi doing. He is definitely, most definitely working on 3D Mario, and I guarantee you we will see that within the next year. So hold out hope, friends, if you were really, really upset to not see a 3D Mario game this year, as everyone kind of expected it to be this year, but Donkey Kong took its place and it looks amazing. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's content. Click on the notification bell if you want to know exactly when I upload all my videos, and consider joining my membership program to help support my channel. Just a couple bucks a month to get a bunch of cool perks. Click on the left side of the video if you want to see a more in-depth breakdown of what is going on with the 3D Mario team and this team that is making Donkey Kong Bonanza, and click on the right side of your screen to see my Nintendo Switch 2 1 month later video. Thank you so much for making it once again to the end. Have a phenomenal day. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk. I have been Ray, and I will see you all in the next video.